April 12 was one of the most significant days in modern Hungarian history, the most anticipated election ever since 2002, and the record-breaking 70+% attendance rate further proves that. So I was pretty surprised how many similarities I was able to notice between the campaigns of Fidesz and Tisza and the propaganda methods used by the rebels and the capital within the third edition of the Hunger Games series, Mockingjay. But why is it? Well, the revolt of the people of Hungary and Panem is really similar because it's both against corruption. There are many different reasons for it. Of course, in Panem they fight against the Hunger Games and oppression against the districts, but in Hungary it was more against the regime of Fidesz, the growing prices, the worst economy, and obviously it was a choice between remaining in the EU or siding with Russia. But it's a very interesting thing because a hopeful figure has appeared.
Előtt az üggyel kapcsolatban, úgyhogy köszöntöm is őt. Szervusz Péter, köszönöm szépen, hogy elfogadtad meghívásunkat.
Jó estét, szervusz.
It's kind of the same how in the 74th Hunger Games, a hopeful figure called Katniss Everdeen appeared, defying the capital and then winning the Hunger Games. But he kind of changed the politics in a sense that he gave people hope. A similar figure, somebody who could destroy the regime and take over. This, of course, caused hateful propaganda against this said person by Fidesz and making people live in fear, which was a very interesting choice, but it was something that both parties did in the capital and within Fidesz. Of course, this type of hateful propaganda and making people live in fear was executed in very different ways amongst the two. But the similarities are that they both said it will only cause pain and suffering if we choose someone else. But how is it? And what type of aspects and parallels are so similar between these two very significant things?
Follow along and let me tell you.
Fidesz has been on reign over Hungary for 16 years, 20 if we count between the time of 1998 and 2002. And Snow has been on regime for around 25 years, maybe more, because we know that he was also the president during Sunrise on the Reaping. And it's, of course, kind of dictatorship-ish if you can be on power for so long and the people don't have anything bad to say against you. And of course, the lavish people, the lavish parties for the elite and people living in poverty is something that we are so used to today. But especially Hungary, which is supposed to be a very advanced country, should be in a very good economic state. Should be. And of course, there is the elite 1% who we see partying. I will cut in pictures, but there was so many proof. It was very obvious that while people close to the power were able to afford multi-million forints amounts of clothes and houses and yachts, while people were trying to survive from 80,000 forints of pension per month, which was obviously a very bad way to live. And then it became Péter Magyarország to actually do something. And just like Katniss did in the books, he also visited most of the country. Of course, Katniss didn't do it out of free will. She did it because the Victory Tour demanded her to do so. But when it came to revolutionary scenes, she also visited District 2, 8, and 12. She was seen with the rebels, with injured. She was talking to them, and that's what Magyar actually did. He also went within the people who lived in poverty, who lived in a bad place, and kind of tried to help them, at least morally for now, because he wasn't in office, so he wasn't able to do anything about it, but it was still a very important gesture that kind of gave people the hope that they needed at that time. Of course, he made propaganda videos just like the rebels did during the revolution. I think the most important of that was the documentary made about him that actually made it to a film festival just now. And also when it was uploaded to YouTube for 2 days, it got over 3.3 million views in 2 days before it was deleted because they only uploaded it for like 2 days. And it really shows that how much people are actually interested in propaganda, even if it's a positive one, because they were just so done with the regime. And that's kind of what the rebels did as well. They filmed these hopeful propaganda videos about Katniss and the rebels and kind of just made sure that everybody in the district saw them and people were interested, just like the Hungarians were interested about this type of propaganda that they saw.
And if we burn, you burn with us!
Another interesting part for me is that how non-politicians joined the cause of the rebels or the cause of Tisza when it comes to the Hungarian elections. Obviously, it's hard to say that someone is a politician, especially in Panem, because I think politics is kind of a non-existent concept there. But when it comes to the victors, who are supposed to have barely nothing to do with politics, in a sense, they became the key figures of the revolution and of the anti-revolution. The same goes with the people, the normal people also got involved with a bunch of it, and also the game makers who have nothing to do with politics, or basically anyone, because everybody was involved, especially in Panem. And the same goes to Hungary. I think a lot of people were not interested in politics because they kind of felt or kind of thought that it's impossible to switch the system. But when they found a way for it, everybody became interested in politics. Or if not everyone, most people, or I and the people I know certainly did. And because of it, so many people who were non-politicians or have nothing to do with politics kind of joined it and joined the cause. And it was a community thing to do. And the same goes to most ministers who were named by Tisza were actually not politicians by trade. And I think that's a really important thing for them. And the constant humiliation that I said with the hateful propaganda is also a very interesting aspect, because the same lies were spread around that was with Panem. The main point of Orbán's campaign was to point out that if we chose Tisza, we would go to war. War against who, you may ask? Well, war in Ukraine, obviously, because we would sell our soul to Zelensky.
The problem is the war.
And the same goes if you remember reading the book or just seeing the movie. Fidesz says that he thinks the most important things that the rebels should do is put down their weapons and try to come to terms with the capital, because if the revolution happens, all it would bring was war and death, and that would be so bad.
Kill ourselves off. Killing is not the answer. Everyone needs to lay down their weapons immediately, or else that's it.
But when you think about it, it's kind of the same concept. They are both threatening with something. You can kind of see the same threat that goes around. If you don't choose us, you will die. And that's the main message of both parties. If you don't choose the right side of history, you will die and you will suffer. Or if you won't suffer, your children will. And I think the threat is really the same, but at the same time, it's really different because of the context. Another thing I wanted to point out was District 2. As we know, District 2 is the military district, as it is the masonry district, and it's one of the most important places of the capital, especially when it comes to the revolution, for it being the last loyal district to the capital. It's very important because it's a very loyal place, and I can really line parallels with it when it comes to the Hungarian city of Debrecen, because it was also one of the most loyal big cities when it comes to Fidesz. What it was until the really big drama broke out, which was the battery factory of good.
Hi, editing Sava here. I just wanted to say that I made a mistake here because I said that good was close to Debrecen, which is actually very stupid of me. It's actually because there was a similar type of factory in Debrecen as it was in Good, and the people were actually very afraid that the same thing was happening in Debrecen just without them knowing, and this is why they decided to side away from Fidesz.
And the same kind of happened with District 2, especially when it comes to the nut that they had to break open. And when they did, they kind of had this grand realization moment, especially after Katniss's speech, that the capital doesn't really care about them. And I think the same goes for Debrecen, when they kind of had to realize that Fidesz doesn't care about them. It only cares about their votes and their loyalty, but it doesn't care what happens to the people. And like, it didn't care when the nut fell, thanks to Gail, but they did the same. They left them to die, they didn't care about them, and it was Katniss's speech, or when it comes, I don't even think they needed a speech in Hungary. They kind of just realized that, oh shit, they've been poisoning us for years, and that we don't need to support these people. I think the same happened with Debrecen and with District 2, because they both had to realize that the system doesn't care about them, and they have been essentially used.
I'm afraid we've both been played for fools.
And these were my main points when it comes to similarities, when it comes to the revolution. But I would say it's not fun until we don't do a casting of who's who when it comes to the Hungarian elections and the revolution in the Hunger Games.
And may the odds be ever in your favor.
It's of course very complicated, especially because I don't think anybody would be President Coin for the reason of her being a horrible human, and I don't think there was anyone who tried to be horrible but also was on the rebel side. Maybe in the future we'll find a person who would be like President Coin, but I really manifest that we don't, because we just found peace. I feel like I don't need any more complicated stuff in here. When it comes to the victors or Plutarch, the most important of the rebels are always coming from within the community of the capital. Same with Péter Magyar, who was associated with Fidesz for 2 decades, and he was also married to the former Minister of Justice. In this sense, I would very confidently put him as Plutarch Heavensby, because he was also very trusted by the Prime Minister, with him being head game maker, and he was also there for a very long time, meaning that he was also there during Sunrise on the Reaping, and he was also the leader of the revolution, just like Péter Magyar is the leader of the Tisza party, which kind of makes him the leader of the change. I think the former victors' places could be the ministers, especially those who have gotten national honors over the years before siding away from Fidesz, like István Kapitány or Ervin Nagy, who are both people who were celebrated before they actually took sides in politics, and after that they do try to make the people dislike them by hateful propaganda and spreading lies about them. And I think it's most important to note that many politicians among Tisza are performers by trade, actors, opera singers, or just singers in general. They know how to entertain a crowd, just like the victors had to do as well. And I think it's really funny and a really interesting parallel that they are entertainers, just like the victors. When it comes to District 13, I would say that District 13 is the city of Budapest, which is also the capital city of Hungary. Budapest has been anti-Fidesz for, I would say, good 8 or 9 years. I'm uncertain. Tisza never truly had to rally in Budapest, which is a very important thing for me, because like I mentioned, Péter Magyar walked and, went around the country advocating for his cause, but he never truly rallied in Budapest, because I think he was very confident that he will win in Budapest. And I think that's the most important part when it comes to Budapest and District 13 being similar, because they are both, I would almost say, blindly follow whichever cause is the most likely to win against the current power. People of Budapest, they rarely fall for propaganda, especially the propaganda made by Fidesz, and they are very supportive of whoever who can bring change. And of course, we do have different lifestyles from District 13. We are not really strict when it comes to life, and I would say that Budapest is one of the best cities in Europe, but the goal of it was all the same. When it comes to the capital, there's a very different situation, because I don't think that the capital would be a place in Hungary. I would call it more the people. And similarly to the people of capital, they were also brainwashed by propaganda. The war psychosis is happening with people believing that if we go Tisza, we would go to war, especially the young people.
3 fiam van. Én nem azért neveltem fel a 3 gyerekemet, hogy elvigyék.
Kivinné el?
Na, hadd ne mondjam.
Hát mondja.
Hát ne kerüljünk be a háborúba.
De hogy kerülnénk be?
Hát, ha nem akarom kimondani ennek a szemétládának a nevét, mert az nagyon a ukrán pártoknál áll, és én azt nem akarom.
Fél a háborútól?
Félek.
És milyen háborútól? Hogyan törne ez ki?
Hát, ukránok könnyen átterjesztik Európára, én véleményem.
Hogyan terjesztik át?
Hát úgy, hogy Brüsszel is az ő oldalukon áll sajnos.
Jó, de hogyan terjesztik át? Tehát hogy kerülne Magyarország bele egy ilyen konfliktusba?
Hát, úgy, hogy egy drón berepül, vagy valami is már az hozza a konfliktusokat.
Honnan repülne be drón?
Ukránoktól.
Ők drónnal támadnak Magyarországon?
Elképzelhető.
És ez miért jó nekik? Tehát ugye a NATO-ba és az EU-ba tartanak, akkor miért támadnának egy NATO és EU tagországot?
Mert addig kapnak pénzt, amíg zajlik a háború.
And it's kind of similar with how Peter was warning people about the war, like I said, and how the revolution and the war against the capital would be very pointless. And I am very confident to say that most people in the capital also lived in war psychosis. And of course, when it comes to believing that Katniss is a mutt, it's also like believing that Péter Magyar will bring us war. It's similar, in my opinion, that, you make somebody believe that a person who has done nothing bad to you, especially especially when it comes to Katniss and Peeta, would kill you, essentially. And the same was made to believe by the people of Hungary, because they were taught to believe that if Péter Magyar would be voted, he would bring war to the country. Of course, that hasn't happened yet as of May 9th when I'm recording this video. So hell yeah, we are not in war yet. If we are, I will make sure to update you. And I think the same goes for the people, and especially the people of the capital, that there are too much fear for them to actually hope or want a change. And I think it's very important, and this is the most stark contrast with people of the capital and the districts, that while the people of the capital have too much fear or too much blast to care about the change, the people of the districts have too much fear to hope for a change. And I think it's a very interesting paradox that none of these people could actually bring change until Katniss shows up. I also have to say, because of this, that the capital in Panem is the exact opposite of that in Hungary. The people in Hungary are made to believe that Péter Magyar would sell his soul to Zelensky or the EU. And I think this really shows us how different the capital it is in the Hunger Games than it is in Hungary. Because the people don't live in luxury. Votes are brought for some money or free food, and the quality of life is very, very low, especially in those side of the country and amongst those people who are very, very loyal Fidesz voters. It's either this or the absolute elite. The Orbán regime has been happening for 16 years, and they almost forgot what it's like to be under somebody else. And because of the war psychosis that was brought upon them, just like the same way it was brought upon the people of Panem, and the hope taken away from them, because every single year 2 kids from their district was taken away for war, essentially war, like dying, took away the focus of the corruption that was happening amongst them. And I think the only reason why Katniss or Gale truly cared about what's happening in the capital, especially in Gale, because I think it's mentioned multiple times in the book that Katniss does know that the capital is corrupt, but she doesn't really voice her opinions because she has bigger fish to fry. And I think that's the same thing when it comes to the people who live in poverty in Hungary, because they are too busy trying to survive off of 80,000 forints per month for pension to actually care about how corrupt this whole thing is. And I think this is the beauty of it all and the true parallel that I found, because the people are so similarly treated in Panem and in Hungary that it's actually almost sad. And so yeah, this is why I think we don't have a capital in Hungary. We only have people who have been brainwashed by propaganda, or those who are opportunists and they want money and they want to take away from those who already have little. But of course, even if that corruption is happening, there is somebody who's going to change that, and that somebody is a Mockingjay. So who is Hungary's Mockingjay? Who is the person who is like Katniss? Someone who sacrifices themselves for the greater good, one who stood up against the corruption in the system, someone who knows what it's like. 3 people have been Hungary's Mockingjays: Bence Szabó, Szilveszter Pálinkás, and the guy named Gandalf. Don't ask. And like Katniss, they also saw the corruption, they stood up against it, and they made it out without harm. And that just proves how fragile the system truly is.
It must be a fragile system if it can be brought down by just a few berries.
Of course, what is the Mockingjay? What does it do to the people of Hungary and the people of Panem? Well, of course, it proves people's suspicion. These 3 stood up against the country's corruption. One of them was a special agent. The other one has served in the military, and the third was, it's a really complicated story, I'm not going into it. So it was really bad. They all proved the people's suspicions on corruption happening. And even though you would say that they don't need proof, it was a very nice reassurance that yes, corruption is happening and we should worry about it. Of course, we got people to look up to, heroes essentially to look up for, to look for hope, because they do give the people hope, especially when it was just a few weeks before the elections. And they are leading light. And even though they are leading lights, they have nothing to do with politics, and they are not politicians, and they don't do this for the money. They did it for the love of the game, essentially. They did it for the love of the people and the hate for corruption. And I think the same can be said about Katniss. Even if she has a very different temperament, I think it's very important to note that Katniss wants nothing to do with politics, and these 3 have also nothing to do with politics, or if they do, they are doing it from the background. And I think that is a Mockingjay, and that is what those 3 give the people when they needed it the most. They might not have done much for a long time in the campaign, but it gave the people that final push they needed, and there was no coming back from there. They were the ones who gave the final confirmation, and they were the ones who gave the final final hope for all of us that this is doable and this corrupt system must be overthrown, just the way Katniss did. Because yes, the people of Panem were aware of the corruption happening. They knew that the Hunger Games weren't good and they weren't correct. But when a little girl, well, she's not a little girl, but essentially she's a child from District 12 comes, defies the Capitol twice and goes away slightly unharmed, that gives you hope and it gives you the final push you need towards fighting for your own rights and for your victory. And this is what the Mockingjay truly represents. I don't think the Mockingjay is Katniss in the third book. I think the Mockingjay was Katniss all along, and I think that really proves us that she was the final push that the people in the districts needed. And this is the same thing that those three serve for Hungary. But what are my final conclusions?
Thank you for your consideration.
I think the outcome was very similar to Panem and Hungary. Of course, the stakes were different, like I said, very different, but the people will be held accountable. I think that's the most important part. A lot of people, many high officials in Fidesz would be held accountable and before court for theft, for corruption, for everything they've done to this country for 16 years. And like I said, I'm recording this video on May 9th. This is when the new parliament and also the new ministries and also the new prime minister is put to office, which is a very interesting day and a very good one. And I think just like with Panem, the people are very hopeful for the country's future and they are very, very happy that the corruption is hopefully gone for good. Hungary and Panem chose. Even if one did through democracy and the other revolution, the situation was very different. The stakes were high in both cases and I'm glad for success. And I think that's the most important part about it all, that even though we did it in different ways, it's kind of proof that corruption can be defeated. Even if in different ways, shapes and forms, we are all able to do it if we put our minds into it. And sometimes it takes just a few hopeful figures and someone feeling fight for the people's right, and boom, freedom is there. Life right now might not be perfect, but this does give me and other 10 million people hope, and hope is dangerous. And I'm really excited to what to do with it, and I really hope it will turn for the better. And this election and the revolution in Panem were both very risky gambles. So yeah, please remember and never forget that there are always much worse games to play.